Hello. In this expedition, we're taking a look at some of the major historical milestones that led to our understanding that the universe is expanding. One of our first steps that we can access through the Sloan Digital Sky Survey database is looking at the distribution of stars and galaxies, or as they were known at the time, nebula, throughout the sky. This may seem like a very straightforward thing to do, a matter of counting stars and counting galaxies, but logistically it's a little difficult. So let's go through and take a look at some of the steps that are outlined in the activity. Our first step is to use the striped coverage map available through Sloan to choose some locations to sample. And if you want to know more about reading this graph, you'll need to go to the help section. But for now, I'm just going to show you that I went across on declination of 10, and I moved across, and about every 50 degrees of RA, I chose a sample coordinates to plug into the navigate tool. Now I hope you're working in a big group on this, because the idea from this activity would be to sample across the sky at every 10 degrees, and that's a lot of sample locations. I'm just going to go through one for you, and you can expand those procedures from there. Our next step in our procedure is to take each one of the locations that we had samples for from our coverage map and load those into the navigate tool. So I enter the RA and the deck here, and I like to have grid and label up so that I make sure that each one of my areas is being viewed from the same magnification, and I check along the edges to be sure that I have complete coverage on this site. And that's the main purpose of looking at them. It also gives us a qualitative view of what that area of the sky looks like, so that we can match that up with the actual data that we're going to get a little bit later. You can also see here that I did not go for 350 degrees of RA. I chose 345 because on the coverage map it showed me that there wasn't complete coverage at 350, so I followed the procedures that I set up and shifted to the east up to 20 degrees, and then entered that for my RA location. You can choose any procedures you want, just want to make it uniform so that you're always sampling using the same procedures. So I've gone across, and you'll see that the declination remains the same as I move across the sky. I'm changing the RA and moving to the west. So I found quite a few locations to sample. And in fact, as I move across, I found some interesting objects which distracted my attention for quite a while. There's all sorts of tools and programs that you can use to ask more questions about interesting things that you might want to explore, or just record those coordinates for later exploration. You can use them in another activity possibly. So moving across, I have all my data set up, and this is an example of an area that there was no data here for. I could see that on the coverage chart. I just wanted to show you what that looks like, and you can see also I zoomed in here a little bit, or zoomed out, excuse me, and you can see off to the northwest there is coverage here, but because it's to the west, my procedures say I'm only going to move to the east, so this is not going to be part of my study group. And we will move on in the next section a little bit more on where the stars and galaxies are in each image. Although this next step is optional, it's really handy, and the chart tool that we're going to use might be helpful in other situations. So let's take a look. From your navigate tool, up on the far left hand corner is a link to chart, and this is going to give you a tool that helps you find a finding chart for your particular object. There are lots of drawing options down here that if we were going to print, we might want to invert, we might want to mark all sorts of things on this chart before we printed it. But for our activity here, we are going to simply mark the stars on this chart using S in the query box, and then we are going to click on Get Image, and the SDSS will mark all of the stars that are in this field. Later on, we're going to have a query count these stars for us, but part of what's helpful here is that you may come into a situation where part of this field is not counted, and that's helpful to know because you won't get that information out of the query later. So checking this out in advance is also helpful. So we can do stars by marking S in this query box, and we can mark galaxies by marking a G, and then again get image, and they count the galaxies. Later on, like I said, we will be counting these using a query, and that'll be our next step. For our next step, we're going to ask SkyServer to do our counting for us. So first we're going to start by counting stars. So we're going to use the drop-down menu in the search form tool to say we would like to show me stars, and we're going to do it in a particular area, and that is going to be around. So this is going to construct a radial search. Our image windows, as you will remember, were square images, and what I have done is chosen, since this is 6 arc minutes across, so if I want to do approximately this window using a radial search, I'm going to choose 3 arc minutes in a radius around this particular point, which is what I'm telling the search form tool to do. So 3 arc minutes in that location. I get to skip everything else and scroll down. I only want this query to count the objects, and since I've used this chart just previously, the button for create query is now called update query, and I can continually go in and simply change a few parameters, update the query, and our object is set. Then when I've got my queries generated, I can see I've got a select line, from line, and where, and you can learn more about SQL queries using the help tools in on this website. And then I'm going to just simply send this query to SkyServer, and it very quickly returns a number for me. I'm going to repeat these procedures for each one of the locations and document my results in a chart so that I can be graphed later. And all I have to do then, if I want to change the query, is go to the top of the page, and I can choose galaxies next time around for this same location, and I can update my query. Everything else is the same. I've updated it. Now it's going to say it's choosing galaxies on the from line, and I submit that to query, and I get 146 galaxies. So we're going to do this for each one of our locations and follow the rest of the procedures. So good luck and have fun.